Because as we speak, the World Police and Fire Games is having their opening ceremonies down at GM Place. The World Police and Fire Games is bringing together 12,000 firefighters, police officers, and correction officers from around the world to come and compete to demonstrate their skill and their ability, but failing to address the brutality, the violence, and the complete lack of accountability that exists in every police force around the world. So we have some people that are going to speak, but rather than speak to each other, we're going to march down to where the World Police and Fire Games is having their opening ceremonies, and we're going to tell them what we think of their stupid games. The first speaker that we're going to have is someone from Stop War. She's going to talk about the role of Canadian forces training police in other countries. I bring greetings and solidarity from Stop War. We stand with the Anti-Poverty Committee of Vancouver in all your struggles, and in particular against police violence. We also call for an end to the violence that is inflicted throughout the world at the hands of Canadian policies. Policies that train police forces of international states in the same brutal methods perfected here on Turtle Island, all in the name of empire. I bring you a few snippets of what the police brutality looks like. In the early 70s, it was reported that the RCMP were training the apartheid-era South African police in some sort of liaison or intelligence gathering. Also in the 70s, that the Canadian military began training Jamaican and Trinidadian police in military forces in methods to maintain, I quote, internal security and stability. Trinidadian forces have included as their targets peaceful protest against the presence of Canadian banks there. When that training program began in the 70s, a Canadian external officer noted, "We're not colonists by intent, but by circumstances." And in 2008, when RCMP officers were hired to run Antigua's police force, the National Post quoted a Canadian expat who explained how some see a climate of neo-colonialism with these policies. Haiti has also suffered greatly under police brutality that the Canadian state is again responsible for. In the 2 years following the military coup that deposed Aristide's democratic elected government, an estimated 8,000 people were killed in the Haitian capital. 21.7% of those murders, often of peaceful demonstrators or through massacres in poor neighborhoods, were officially attributed to the Haitian National Police Force. That police force was trained by Canadian troops and the RCMP, who were often involved in directly supporting the murderous operations. 1 year after the U.S. invasion of Iraq, RCMP began training Iraq police and were proud to report they trained 32,000 new Iraq police officers. And least we forget Afghanistan. Since 2002, Canadian troops have brought terror to the most brutal of the most brutal kinds, and the RCMP, along with troops, have trained Afghan police and military forces spreading that terror. Nobody needs nor wants terror and brutalization at anyone's hands, least of all those with no accountability. And they choose to treat it as a game to celebrate. And the militarization of our community. And police violence. Let the people everywhere govern themselves without the threat of state-sanctioned terror.
All information about police accountability as a fundamental factor to knowledge. Beyond knowledge, registering your opinion on nowpolling.ca so it can be counted and published as the complementary action towards demanding social change for social justice. Remember, your participation is the essence of direct democracy.
All right, our next speaker is going to talk about a little something closer to home. Alyssa from the Olympic Resistance Network is going to talk about the harassment, the surveillance by the Vancouver Integrated Security Unit for 2010 and the VPD against anti-Olympic activists. And remind everybody that the World Police and Fire Games are not only a practice run for control of public space and corporate PR in 2010, but also a massive lie to Vancouverites that policing is just a friendly game to entertain the masses. This gathering of security-approved police and emergency crews is also being used as a chance to further plot and scheme to restrict free expression and political action during the Olympics, with at least 16,000 security and military. The type of ideas that led to the slaughter of hundreds of Mexican protesters, activists, and students before the Olympic Games in '68. Vancouverites already know to expect such hypocrisy and self-serving public relations from the VPD and the RCMP. Even out-of-town, off-duty cops, like the one who beat a newspaper delivery man while uttering racial slurs, can get off with 3 weeks of house arrest, not to mention the cops who murder Vancouverites too numerous to mention with no punishment whatsoever. We know that the priorities of developers, city government, and the Olympics sacrifice critical social services like the MAP van, necessary affordable housing, political freedoms, mobility rights, gender equality, environmental health, and the integrity of native land in order to hold their games in BC. Their choices are not ours, and their events are not a game to us. Even more deceitful, the World Police and Fire Games don't really show what these people do in our communities. They aren't getting credit for what they are actually good at: repression of visible poverty and dissent. I'd suggest some new events so the public can see what the police are really up to. First, the intimidation relay. In this event, already seen around BC and on reserves, teams of 2 to 3 Olympic police and intelligence agents surveil, harass, and attempt to question as many Olympic critics as possible. In an earlier blitz, at least 15 people were contacted over 3 days. Coffee shops, transit routes, workplaces, neighbors, and families were targeted, and several police earned a hat trick by trying to intimidate at least 3 activists in 1 day. The next event is bylaw interpretation. Thanks to the vague and broad Vancouver bylaws restricting mobility, assembly, dissent, expression, and media freedoms, it is up to the Olympic police, like all these brilliant fellas you see around here right now, to determine what is legal during the games. This is a game of wits, or in this case half-wits, as individual police officers figure out which of the many bylaws they will use to shut down protest activities in public space. And if none of these apply, they can always declare anyone a nuisance and have them removed. Finally, and most importantly, the poverty crackdown. This is a marathon event requiring commitment and endurance. While the police are clearly busy restricting dissent, they haven't forgotten this event of over-ticketing the downtown east side and anyone displaying blatant poverty. Needless to say, there are a lot of corporate sponsors to support these teams and a lot of ways to remove the poor and homeless from public view thanks to the Olympics. Finally, if you guys don't like the Olympics waste during a housing crisis, the city's repression of protest, the occupation of native land, and the police and fire games' hypocritical public relations farce, then you'll really hate capitalism. Thanks, guys!